These are my friends. See how they glisten. I said, see how they glisten. Ugh, every single time, man. Every single time you want to use the lightsaber for a prop, the batteries are always dead. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. Star Wars on Disney Plus. My old friend of the YouTube channel. You know, I get a little nostalgic when I think about Star Wars Disney Plus shows because I started my channel about 3 years ago or so, and I remember when Mandalorian Season 2 just set off the comic book market by storm. I'll never forget that show being the catalyst to the boom that we felt in 2021. So in this video, I want to talk about Star Wars books, and specifically that of the Ashoka show, and ask ourselves if there has been any disturbance in the market force for the Star Wars books related to Ashoka, and then also talk about where Star Wars books might be going in the future. But of course, before I get into it, if you guys could drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, doing those things, I appreciate it. But let us get into this video here today. Now, of course, no spoilers in this video here today. I know that some of you guys may not have seen Ashoka, but as we know, the Ashoka series came out yesterday with 2 episodes on Disney Plus. Shout out to the comic book group here. It seems like everybody in the comic book world is now talking about Star Wars. I'm behind on my Star Wars cartoons. What do I need to watch in order to understand Ashoka? No spoilers, please. Well, unfortunately, you kind of need to watch a lot. But I'm not going to talk about my review right here. We're going to talk about the market. Here you see a lucky comic book collector winning a Star Wars Darth Vader 3 first appearance of Dr. Aphra for the low price of $44 plus $11 shipping. I mean, we're almost just paying for the price of the slab at this point, right? We got some other discussions right here. Is it time to dump all those Clone Wars #1s? Worst 2 episodes I've ever seen. Acting was bland. CGI looked like a high school editing group. The best was the first 2 minutes, and that doesn't say much for 2 hours. Sabine versus Ren lightsaber duel looked like it was orchestrated by the original Episode 3 stunt coordinator. So, as you can see, folks, a lot of interesting discussion in the comic book market. A lot of talk of if now is the time to sell or buy. How do we feel about the Star Wars books? Well, let's kind of break it down here today and talk about it and see what's going on in the market. Now, like I said, Ashoka came out yesterday. I felt like my social media feed, generally speaking, was fairly positive on the show. I myself am just a little bit apathetic towards Star Wars at the moment. But does that mean that the market is apathetic towards Kanan, the Last Padawan, #6? First full appearance of Sabine, of Ezra, of all the characters that basically made their debut in live action in this show last night. And did we get any movement in the market? Well, actually, we did get a couple of sales. Here you see a slash price of 100. Nothing really too crazy. Here you see a buy it now 9.8 of 320, which is probably right in line to where this book has been selling at the 9.8 range for a little bit of time now, you know. And then we had, of course, a couple sales leading up to the premiere a few days ago, 159 at the 9.6, a 311 live auction, at the 9.8 level. And like I mentioned, you know, the 9.8s here have been kind of hovering around that $320 price point for quite a while now. Almost calendar year or so, you've pretty much been able to buy this book at its floor value around the, you know, $375 in October of 2022, $326 now, give or take, pretty much the same amount. But before I get too in the weeds of it, let's also talk about the other book that I think is the most important one that relates to specifically this show is Star Wars, The Clone Wars #1, first appearance of Ashoka in comic book form. Of course, this was a book that went like astronomical during COVID lockdown 2021. And then there's also, of course, the variant edition, which is even more rare. That is this one right here, special edition for Dark Horse 100. This one is also a what many consider to be the Star Wars modern grail to have. I mean, rivaling basically prices of a Star Wars #1 from 1977. I mean, actually above prices of that book, which we're also going to talk about in a second. But these 2 books, obviously being the first Ashoka, very, very big keys, you know, not a tremendous amount on the census. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's also not that high, compared to other options of other grails out there in the comic book market. And the question is, of course, did we get any sales for this book in this last, few days or so? Well, we did get a few. We got a 9.6 sale right here at the $1,000 range. That's pretty much in line to what this book has been selling at. We've got a few live auctions right here, $864 for this raw copy. We had a 9.2 go for $700. We had another raw copy over here. We had another raw copy go for $750. We had another one go for $500. Don't know if that was an actual sale. We did also have a buy it now for a raw copy of the special edition cover that went for $2,400. Now this one was advertised as near mint. If that one actually does hit a 9.8, then this could be a really great buy for the person who picked it up. If it hits a 9.6, well, now you're kind of maybe overpaying by a few $100s or so. But that was really it as far as movement in the market for this book. Obviously now, we're kind of in a place where, the shows aren't going to necessarily have a direct effect on, books, flying off the shelves like they once did, especially when we're talking about books at that value range. It's hard to make a FOMO impulse buy at the $2,000 price point as opposed to, the $20 price point. But the question is, where are we at with Star Wars as a brand, as an IP? How do we feel about these comic books and their long-term future? I know that sentiment towards the Star Wars shows has been very, very down. Sentiment towards, I'd say, everything, Disney Star Wars, from the movies to the TV shows, all that stuff. People are not a big fans of these properties, and I completely understand that. But does that mean that the IP is actually dead? Well, let's take a look here and see what the potential for some of these books may be. Now, of course, we have to also talk about Star Wars #1, right? You guys know this book from 1977. The adaptation of the movie via comic book form. Essentially, this has the first appearance of, all the main characters, Luke, Leia, Han Solo, Obi-Wan, or at least them on the cover and things like that. So obviously a big grail comic book when it comes to Star Wars grail comic books. The 9.8s here, $784, fair market value $4,800, 30-day moving $4,500. But one of the things I think is interesting as I was preparing this video and really just thinking about it and thinking about, where we are in the market and what's been going on is we have to remember that this book wasn't all that desired until we got the Disney kind of plus shows and that era of television back in 2020. I mean, you can already see that this book, for a long time, was fairly flat. If anything, it was actually kind of going down from the point of 2016 all the way through 2019 for those 3 years. Obviously, got a lift. I think when we had the original sequel trilogy come out, people were very, very excited about that. So it got that FOMO bump. And yeah, it did sit at a higher floor price in the prior years than it did, prior to that. Where in 2012 and 2011, it was a 682, 500, 600, 800, 500, 600. But generally speaking, a fairly flat book that didn't consistently provide any sort of year-over-year returns, got elevated during the movies, then flat once again, and now got elevated tremendously in 2021. And where it sits today, I'm not going to say that this book is worthless and it's going to crash and all that. I mean, it's only, 5% of the entire census out there at the 9.8 level. But it does sort of beg the question of, how do we feel about Star Wars books in general? Is Star Wars a brand that comic book collectors tend to invest in, tend to hold, tend to value? Obviously, there's a ton of Star Wars monarchies that have been getting hot with all of these Disney Plus shows. I think about Cad Bane and Black Chrysanthemum and all the stuff related to the Han Solo or the Obi-Wan Kenobi show and Mandalorian and all these books. And here we are in Ahsoka once again. And I feel like these are some of the bigger heavy hitters for these characters, that they're pulling out: Thrawn, Ahsoka, Sabine Wren, and all this stuff. So do we think that these books have legs for the future when we look at the Star Wars #1 and seeing how inflated it got, based on this kind of new era of Disney stuff, Disney Star Wars, that, ultimately doesn't seem to be going over that well at current moment's time with the audience? Well, It's impossible to know. It's hard to say. I mean, I'm not an expert on this. I mean, certainly there's a lot of saturation when it comes to Star Wars collectibles. Obviously, the VHSs are very, very popular. I think Star Wars 1, the VHS, is probably the grail of grails for a lot of people to get in the VHS market. I think that there's a lot of toys out there, you know, the Gen 1 toys that a lot of collector money goes to, especially with the Star Wars figurines, the original trilogy and things like that. So do we think that Star Wars has legs? Well, I think that, you know, the talk of this being a dead IP and Star Wars is done and, you know, it's never going to be good again. I think that that's definitely overblown. I'm not willing to bet the farm that Star Wars is not going to have another golden age or another boom period once again. Obviously, they need to right the ship, and it's going to take a little while. It's going to take maybe a while. But at the same time, I mean, this is kind of the faith that you have to have in the collectible world. That, you know, if you believe in something, you got to be willing to buy it when other people are not willing to buy it, and then you can reap the rewards down the line. But this is, of course, why you have to buy what you like. I mean, you better not be buying Star Wars, not liking Star Wars, just assuming that these books are going to have value one day. You better be buying it because you still like it. So that's really the thing. And, you know, talking about macro market stuff and all that we've talked about on the channel many times before, it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while, not only for the cultural aspect to turn the tide, but also for the financial, economic aspect to sort of turn the tide as well, where we're going to start to see some of the values increase in things like comic books and, you know, risk assets and things like that. So it's definitely going to take a while. But if you have faith in the Star Wars property, I mean, why not take a gamble? I think now is a better time to buy than it was, you know, in 2021. And if anything, if you bought a lot in 2021, you could cut your losses, you know, you could do that, or you just need to hold. You just need to hold and hope for better times, or you need to average down, you know, maybe just buy more Ahsoka books if you actually think that this is going to crescendo to some epic billion-dollar movie and crossover that Dave Filoni is going to, you know, save the Star Wars universe for. So very, very interesting to see that. I don't know how you guys feel, generally speaking, about the Star Wars IP, the Star Wars franchise. It does feel like, obviously, Ashoka is made by Dave Filoni. He cares a lot about the nuance and the details of the Star Wars universe. You know, it feels like Star Wars. I'll give the show that. I think that writing is still an issue on Disney Plus. I think a lot of the shows could use a little more time in the oven, a little more craft with their screenplays. But hey, at least it's better than Book of Boba Fett. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. That was me just kind of doing a quick little market recap, a quick overview of what's going on with Star Wars books. Are you guys a little concerned with Star Wars as an IP and Star Wars comic book related properties? Do you guys think that these have a long-term future? How do you feel about Star Wars #1? Now, I don't think that Star Wars #1 is ever going to reset back to that 2020 price. But do you guys think it's a little bit overinflated? Does it concern you that the book had been so flat for so many years and then all of a sudden, you know, became this Mega Bronze Age Grail? What do you guys think about that? Anyways, that's all I got for this video. Like, comment, subscribe. See you on the next one.